So I'm gonna stop streaming.
Skip track.
We're on every time. Okay, every time. Commercial's on. Okay, hello. Oh, sweet. Okay, we're doing this a third, fourth time. Don't give up on us. It is through our mistakes that we have finally gotten better at this, but we have really strong internet signal and we have the best weather here in Hawaii. So let me try this again. I'm Dr. Boz. Welcome back. It has been 3 weeks and I am completely on my own without my little helper who's been with me since I started this. He is on a backpacking trip to Hawaii or to Europe, and I have been going the other way around the world on a family vacation to see our foreign exchange students' family. So this is my first time absolutely completely on my own, and I've been promising myself a new computer, but I did not want to take that on while traveling. So it's still my old 2012 computer, and I am super happy to say that I think it's working. So I'm back. I have a great story to talk to you about today, and we're going to use it as a teachable moment. I've seen several comments from you guys asking questions, and I'll tell you, it really does spark my favorite thread that God has gifted me, which is to be a teacher in medicine and help people improve their health. You can't, hopefully you can notice the background here. I wonder if I can get there is a volcano, a dead volcano, but a volcano that I'm leaving my son with here in Hawaii that's in the background. We are at one of the libraries, but maybe my best is I'm going to get a palm tree in the background, but that's good enough for me. So yes, we're in Hawaii, and I just thought I'd start by a little recap of where we've been. If you follow me on Facebook, you'll see some of the pictures there. So if you're here just to learn about keto, you're going to want to skip forward in this if you're watching this on replay. If you're live, you are stuck with me and you're going to hear a little bit about where we've been. So our family is from South Dakota and we have 3 sons. This year Prescott's 18. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. And we've had foreign exchange students in our family several times. This past year we had a foreign exchange student from China join us. And what a great social experiment to add a teenage girl to a house full of teenage boys. It was wonderful. All the behavior issues that I wanted to happen as a mom suddenly came together when you added a teenage girl. So it was wonderful. But her family asked us to come visit, and we applied for a visa to China, and we went to China. As we were in China, the mechanics of how to get around and how to function are so different. Here's a fun fact. If you go to China, there is an app called WeChat, and if you don't put money on it before you go, and you get to China, and you get to a stand, and you've taken your US dollars, and you've turned them into yen, and you try to buy something from someone, they're going to look at you very strange, and they're going to say, of course, in Chinese, and we did use my Google Translate trying to understand what they were saying, that they want you to pay with this electronic app. And if you haven't set that up and you're from South Dakota, you're going to call your banker and it's going to be like 3 in the morning. And they're going to say, what do you mean you want me to put all your money onto an app? It's 3 in the morning. Why are you calling? How rude. But in the end, you can't pay for anything unless you use this electronic app. And if you don't set that up before you leave, it is a nightmare. They don't take US dollars. They don't take Chinese yen. You can't go into a bank and say, can you just put this on an app if you don't have a bank account with them? Yeah, it was not very user friendly. So thankfully, our host families, our host daughter's family rescued us with a phone with an app on it, and they put our money into the app. Anyway, so long story short, we did experience China. We got on one of these high-speed trains, and in China, the government keeps pretty close track of where everyone is. So our family goes to get off the train, and we leave our tickets. Some of us leave our tickets on the train, like we've been to the train that rides over, here we go. And apparently you can't get out of the train station until the government has confirmed that you arrived at the location that you said you were coming to. So 6 days in China, completely upside down. Midnight was noon, noon was midnight, and we went to Thailand. So I was really hoping to show you a video. This is a gift a few years ago. A patient introduced and gifted my family 2 tickets to go see the elephants white elephants in Thailand. And I was too busy, and so my husband and my youngest son went to this Thai elephant home, which is near the the rulers, or I don't know if they call him the king of Thailand's white elephants. Now, since those 3 years have passed, there's actually been a transition of power, and you're watching the comments to make sure that okay. So as there's been a transition of power, the son is now in charge, and it's not a bad thing, but it sure is a transition from this ruler who would travel with the people and be with the people to his son, who is not quite as integrated into the community. And so we returned to this Thai elephant home because my 13-year-old, then 10-year-old, came home and told stories of elephants that were like, it was unimaginable. You got to ride on the elephants, you got to give the elephants a mud bath, you got to feed the elephants, you did chores. You're essentially, it's a camp, if you would, that you are a volunteer at the camp to try and help service the elephants and take care of them. And in trade, you get this amazing experience. Like parents, if you're looking for a teenage adventure, minus the time change, it beats the heck out of Disneyland. Much cheaper, but also much more enriching as a family. And if you, if you're Facebook fans, or if you're Facebook people, you go over to Facebook and type in my name, the videos are public. But what I really want to encourage is what a great way to detox from electronics, from the world of being overly stimulated by all of our electronic world. So on the way home, my son Prescott got his final acceptance letter to the University of Hawaii. So instead of flying home, my husband and sons flew home while Prescott, one of the oldest son, and I stayed here in Hawaii to get him finished registered for school. And we're not quite done. It is last minute, and he is excited because the University of Hawaii gives reciprocity to South Dakotans. So that in-state tuition for South Dakotans to go to Hawaii is like a no-brainer. I was saying to him, I hope that by the end of the first semester, you can focus past all the beautiful weather, the incredible opportunities to be outside for hiking and beach. And that's not to mention the unbelievably gorgeous people, men and women, but unbelievable, beach bodies, I guess. So, an 18-year-old boy all the way across the world without his mother, probably better that I don't look. Anyway, welcome to Why I've Been Gone. Just thanks for the forgiveness on doing that. We weren't sure where we were going to get our visas. And I just wanted to say the last time we checked in, I was asking for prayers about my dad, who, despite being on a ketogenic diet and lots of education on the ketogenic diet, his kidney function when we started was about 20% of what it should be. And he has continued to be a 75-year-old man whose kidney function got worse. And the day before we left on our trip was his first day of dialysis. So I just want to say thank you for everybody. For those of you out there who don't know much about dialysis, my parents have had a crash course. His heart is too stiff. It's got heart failure, so it's too stiff for the kind of dialysis where they take the blood out of your body, clean it, and then put it back in. Instead, he uses something called peritoneal dialysis, where they are able to infuse fluid into his abdomen, and then the fluid is used as a gradient for his missing kidney function. I think it's very telling that the fluid they put into his abdomen is it's sugar water. So it plays right into some of the teachable things I'm going to go through in the next month. But we talk about that first few weeks when you become a keto, and how the number of sugar molecules within your bloodstream holds on to so much fluid, and as you lower the blood sugar, you lose a lot of weight. And you'll see the naysayers. I think I need to get my microphone a little closer. The the naysayers, see if that works better, are quick to tell you, yep, you're not losing water, you're not losing weight, you're losing water weight, and what a misconception that can be. It is water weight, but it is water weight that does not belong there, and you can't miss how many people say, oh, you're just going to lose that first part of the weight and then you're going to be done. That's not true. You really do. That water does not belong in your system. In the book, you'll see me talk very extensively about how important that was to getting my mom in the right direction. Was her body was filled with cancer, so she had lots of extra fluid in her system, and those first 15 pounds were probably 80% water, but man, she felt better, her brain was thinking better, and many parts of her system started to work better. Even though Dad follows the ketogenic diet, kidney cells are not something you can restore. You don't get to make new ones. His kidneys have lasted much longer than anybody expected, with only 20%. And I can't wait to do the posts in the next few weeks on the interviews he's had with the dietitians as they talk to him about 3 meals a day and so many carbs per day. And he's like, I think you should talk to my daughter. And I'm like, just hand them the book first. It's just a lot shorter conversation if they start with reading the book. So I have been reading some of the comments before I started, and just want to say thank you for being patient on my little hiccup there of getting all the buttons correctly pushed. I want to take time to read a message that I got from one of you in the last week, and I'm going to use this as our teachable case, and then we'll go to answering some of your questions. So it came in an email. The patient's first name is Patty, and she wrote me a nice email saying that she's got the book and she's read the book, but she said, I've been keto since February of this year. I've lost 20 pounds, down from 190 to 168, so I think she should count 22 pounds, not just 20, and she's super excited. Her cholesterol was 250 when she first started, but now her cholesterol is up to 356. So she says, I'm worried that my cholesterol is elevated. Here are my recent numbers with a total cholesterol of 356. So let's just do that out loud. She went from 250 to 350. That's up 100 points. She then goes to tell me that her LDL, or her bad cholesterol, is now 253, and which is, again, really high. If you're a diabetic and you come into my clinic, prior to the keto education that I've been on, I would be very adamant about checking and making sure that LDL gets below 70. That's what the goals would recommend. But she also says that her healthy cholesterol, her good cholesterol, is 76, and her triglycerides are 74, and that her fasting glucoses are in the 90s. So let's just review a few things here. She's lost 22 pounds. She is showing me that the markers within her body are a panel of cholesterol. And although that top cholesterol is higher, the ones that matter to me as an internal medicine physician are how well does it look when you look at the HDL cholesterol, the triglycerides, and we start doing things like total cholesterol to HDL ratio. Hers is 3.4, which is unbelievably good. But when you can get your HDL cholesterol to be higher than your triglycerides, I just want to tell you, Patty, that this is a very good marker that your inflammatory markers are low. So that's what today's lesson is going to be about, is how cholesterol and inflammation, yes, they go hand in hand, but what the cholesterol markers that tell me about your inflammation are not necessarily your total cholesterol. So I'm going to start by just reviewing with you and not using slides, but just talking straight to you on how I explain cholesterol to patients when they come in and they've been on the cholesterol, or they've been on the keto diet and their cholesterol's up. The first thing I remind them is, that cholesterol is a really important part of how our body functions. that it happens to be something we can measure in the labs, but that's not the only thing that matters. When talking about cholesterol, we want you to realize that as a cholesterol level, um, um, total cholesterol is just one part of. I draw your blood, and how much of the cholesterol is kind of floating around inside your blood. And when we look at that, it, there are several other things that it predicts. The reason Patty's concerned about it is that the media and the last 20, 50 years have been spent telling patients how important lowering cholesterol is to lowering heart disease. And I'm here to tell you that we've been misinformed. That is not the biggest predictor of heart disease. Cholesterol is a component, but just looking at the panel of what her HDL and triglycerides are, I'm going to hopefully show you that what you really need to be looking at to tell Patty and to give Patty the confidence that she should keep going on the ketogenic diet is to look at the panel of markers that improve health. Number one, let's look at her 20-pound weight loss. That alone should just be something that she gets praised for and said, congratulations, this is the right direction. Please keep going. Continue to check your cholesterol, but I'm going to give you some other things that I think you're going to be more powerful. They're actually cheaper, and they do a better job of telling you what your cholesterol is right now. Or excuse me, what your risk of heart disease is right now. If you look at why doctors look at cholesterol, they're trying to predict, do you have heart disease? Are you going to be that 30, 40, 50-year-old who has a heart attack? Unfortunately, as our baby boomers have gotten older, the risk of heart disease has been something that's on their minds, on our minds, and as we focus on predicting their risk of death, heart disease becomes this number one focus. It is, the risk of heart disease predicted by total cholesterol still is not well done. In fact, if we look at cholesterol and I had all the money and resources in the world, I would take Patty's blood and I would do a couple of things. I would look at saying, what size of particles does she have floating around in her system? And you're like, what? No, cholesterol comes in different sizes. As you put cholesterol into the machine, it measures, is it a big cholesterol, is it a smaller cholesterol, or is it the healthy cholesterol is made up of different lipids. Your bad cholesterol is made up of different types of fats. And really what we're trying to say is if we have a lot of the LDL cholesterols that are tiny and small, I like to think of them, this isn't exactly, but I like to think of the tiny, small particles can slip into the skin lining of your blood vessels. And that's where atherosclerosis has been connected to your heart disease. So when Patty's blood comes into the machine, she's just looking at total cholesterol. It's gone up from 250 to 350. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have a heart attack. However, several other indicators show us that's probably not the best way to predict her heart disease. I would say that if we could have a point of care test done to look at heart disease, we should be looking at insulin. So I'm going to hop over here and push play on this part of the presentation. And so Prescott's going to make sure that this looks right on the machine, but all of you can help me with comments to see that you can see what I'm seeing. Again, my poor computer is from 2012. So here's the message that I want you to take home from this, and that is that insulin causes heart disease. Yes, insulin. And if you've read the book Any Way You Can, it is the way this channel is funded, so please look at the link below, buy it for a friend, buy it for your doctor, and send me the email as to what happens. I've used several of these to prepare a couple of videos that are coming up. I really love those stories because I'm all about educating not just my patients but my colleagues. If it wasn't for the teachers that taught me, I would probably still be skeptical or at least highly questioning that I want my patients to eat 80% fat. All right, so here is the data that we're going to show you. Insulin causes heart disease. So here is a risk. You say, what is the major risk of heart disease? And I can see this is not lining up correctly on my computer. But we are looking for death or non-fatal MIs as the way that we predict heart disease. And we have really good data from 1998 that says if you look at heart disease and you watch these people for 25 years as they aged. We can see that, yes, we can predict the way they have a heart attack, but it doesn't have anything to do with cholesterol. It has everything to do with how much insulin they had. So at the beginning, we're at 0 years because nobody has died. We've all entered. They entered the study, and then we divided them into quartiles, or quintiles, 5 different sets of what were their insulin levels over time, and especially at 25 years, how many of them had a coronary heart disease event, which meant either they suddenly died of a heart attack or they had a near heart attack, they had a stroke. So these are coronary heart disease events. And if you look, the lowest insulin was the lowest risk for heart disease. The highest insulin was the highest risk for heart disease. And again, this data isn't new. The data is from 1998. So when patients come to me and say, hey, my cholesterol's high, doc, I'm going to have a heart attack, the first thing I remind them of is heart attacks isn't what, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Heart attacks isn't what we use. We don't use insulin to predict heart attacks. Excuse me, we don't use cholesterol to predict heart attacks. We should be using insulin. And as I look at the insulin ratios or the insulin tests for patients that come in, it's not the easiest thing to test in a patient. Insulin is a blood level, and yes, you can get a fasting blood test. If I look at my star patients and I say, okay, we're going to check your insulin, this is really important for the ketogenic diet, be sure you don't have any stress before the test, you don't eat anything 12 hours before the test, that means no coffee, no nothing. We want you truly fasting, you can have a sip of water if you need it, do not take your medicines. I don't want you to have a bowel movement before you have your insulin tested. I want you to be super mindful and in a peaceful place when they draw your blood, because stress increases your insulin level. And so they go into the lab and they are perfectly zen and they get these beautiful insulin numbers of 4 or 3 or something. But then the patients that come in and it's 8 or 10 or 15, and you say, well, tell me about that. And you're like, you know what, doc, I forgot your rules and I got up at midnight and I had a little, bit of, whatever, tea, or so I had something to drink, or you know what, I wasn't feeling well that morning because I was kind of nervous about the test, and I went to the bathroom and oh shoot, I had a bowel movement, or something silly. In the end, the ability to get a perfect insulin test is because so many things vary it. And when you look at the insulin, if you have constant monitoring of insulin, it's just a very volatile, moving test. So there are tests out there where we can check your insulin before you eat, and then you eat, and then we watch your insulin and your sugar, 5 times over the course of several hours, and the cost of that is nearly $2,500 in some places. So it's ridiculous. There is a point of care test that you can do yourself, but I'll be honest, my patients that are motivated enough to do that test often are not as they're not the ones that need the soup. They don't need convincing. They already know that this is the right test for them, and they have plenty of other ways that they've educated themselves to be confident that that cholesterol going up by 100 points isn't the best predictor. So let's back up to this patient who wants to understand, do I have a risk of heart disease? My cholesterol went up by 100. So I was telling you about if I could take Patty's cholesterol and I could look at it in the machine, what I would want to see is that as she's been on the ketogenic diet, her size of cholesterol has gone from a smaller, dense cholesterol, which is really common on the low-fat diet. When cholesterol sources are low, the use of your cholesterol is important. It repairs our cells. It improves our brain function. It is the carrier for nutrients throughout the body. And you need that nutrients to have any type of healing, to restore a brain from depressed to healthy. It needs high fat in order to do that. Several of the fat-based vitamins, including vitamin D, vitamin K, those are really important for repairing of nerves and repairing of brain. But even my patients with like numb feet from diabetic neuropathy as I put them on the ketogenic diet, and I say, you know, you get about a millimeter a month if we keep you in ketosis. We can repair this if the nerves are well nourished. The guy who's nourishing that is your cholesterol. So when Patty first went in, before she was on the ketogenic diet, and her total cholesterol was only 250, I would guess that her size of her particles was small and dense. But as you improve the supply of fat by having an 80% fat diet, so now you're on the ketogenic diet and you have started putting fat into your system, you're doing it in the setting of less than 20 carbs, which is really important. Not only do we decrease the inflammation and decrease the water in the body that doesn't belong there, so our joints feel better, our swelling is less, our repair systems are better. We get to the part of the system that now is efficiently enhancing your skin, waking up your collagen cells, replacing the damage, and that's all through cholesterol in the setting of low inflammation. And you say, well, hey, I want that. That's how, you know, if you've seen my videos on autophagy and how do you reverse age, well, you have to have the supplies, the nutrients that is needed for the repair of the body, and that is found in high fat. If you have high fat with high carbs, you have inflammation. And so it is really important that you are checking yourself. Like, let's just make some guidelines on why I would be so adamant about checking the numbers, if you would, on a ketogenic diet. So we're going to go to, we are going to go to, we're going to go to this one. So I am going to hop over. Testing. Oh, okay. So I totally had you on the screen that doesn't have sound on it, so I'm going to try that again. I'm super sorry. Okay, so let me push play and do that again. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, well, that was a really good story. We're going to try that again. We're talking about the Dr. Boz ratio, and I'm going to push play here. Okay, so you know, you're going to say thanks to Prescott for pointing out that the sound was off, because on my old computer I can't see that when I give you slides, so thank you, Prescott. Okay, you've earned college tuition. Even if it is in-state tuition. Yes, I'll do that. Okay, Dr. Boz ratio. Why do I have Patty doing this? So first of all, Patty's given me some information about her cholesterol, that it went from 250 to 350, right? That's a good indication to say, run, oh my goodness, her cholesterol's up, this must be terrible. And I'm saying, wait a minute, I want to learn a couple more things. I want to know, does Patty's Dr. Boz ratio, has it improved enough that I can be confident that her insulin is lower? So the Dr. Boz ratio is something that I use to predict patients that are struggling with Are they confident in the health of their body on the ketogenic diet? So if you're new to the ketogenic diet, what I really want you to hear is do not panic. Do not panic. The first few months of being on the ketogenic diet, just like Patty, is somebody where I want them to not focus on their blood numbers, but I want them to focus on the diet and keeping those carbohydrates low. I want them to focus on not eating at night, but instead shutting off the food, 7 o'clock, maybe even 6 o'clock if they can, instead of, and then keeping those carbohydrates under 20. I don't want them poking their fingers and getting all this analytic data. I want them feeling better. Well, Patty's done that. She's 2.5 months into this diet, and she really does feel better. She's lost 20 pounds, so that gives me a hint of how her blood glucose and ketones are doing. But there's nothing like numbers to give me even more confidence, because I've never met Patty. But when I look at her cholesterol numbers as a point of education, I will tell you what I would worry about as a physician is I want to know, is her morning sugars as good as she said her morning sugars are 91, so that gives me a little bit, but is she making ketones with that? We've just talked a lot about supplying the body with fat, and at first when they're on the ketogenic diet, it is such a shift of how they eat that we don't talk about the different kinds of fat. We just say, no, we want high fat, just whatever fat it is that tastes good to you while keeping the carbohydrates low. We want bacon, we want processed, cold meat cuts, which we want sausage. And if you're really health conscious, you're going to say, but Dr. Bosworth, that's not good fats. I'm saying, don't scare people with that. Begin the diet with what tastes good to you and then stay on that. Patty has now come 2.5 months into her into her keto diet, and she wants to know, my total cholesterol went from 250 to 350, should I be scared? That's when I want to increase her courage, hopefully a little bit, to be able to poke her finger and check not just her morning blood sugars, but her ketones. What's happening with this is we are estimating her insulin. So instead of her insulin going into my lab and getting a very volatile number, when you take the glucose and the ketones together, you're estimating the average insulin, which is actually a better way to look at her insulin than measuring the actual insulin. So let's look at that. So here's some examples. This glucose was 140. Again, Patty's from America, so that's the units that we use. Her ketones were 0.7. If you divide those out, that would give her a Dr. Boz ratio of 200. I would say that insulin is quite high. The Dr. Boz ratio is of above 100 is high. That would be an insulin that's high. So if you say, well, what if she got her sugars down to 120? And she increased those ketones just a minor amount to 0.8. That brings her Dr. Boz ratio down to 150. Now that's better, that's lower insulin, but it is not a low insulin state. That would put her 350 cholesterol into a higher risk category than a 350 cholesterol where her Dr. Boz ratio is less than 100. So now let's take a blood sugar of 80. That's a really good blood sugar. Her ketones of 1. Again, that's not an uncommon finding, and that puts her Dr. Boz ratio less than 100. Once you get down under 100, you really can be confident that the inflammation is improving, that the insulin is lower in your system. So by looking at the glucose and the ketones together, now she can say, okay, I'm there. I'm going to keep going on this ketogenic diet, and I'm going to keep looking at my cholesterol. The last one is a number that I would find from somebody who's probably doing intermittent fasting, which is a glucose of 68 and ketones of 1.7. That puts the Dr. Boz ratio of 40. And if you can get down to less than 40, that's one of my goals that I have every week. Mind you, I did not do it while on vacation, but to fast long enough to get my sugars low enough and my ketones high enough that my Dr. Boz ratio hits 40. Why do I do that? Because I was like many of my patients for many years, had inflammation and a few extra pounds on there, where I do need to induce some autophagy to repair the system, to improve my health from the probably decade of not following such a processed chemistry. And what I mean by that is the autophagy that I'm trying to ignite is much more likely if I can get that Dr. Boz ratio less than 40. So again, the final number on this is a 20. And if you've read the book any way you can, you'll know that that's what I was trying to get Grandma Rose to. We use the ketogenic diet in Grandma Rose to help her fight cancer. She just turned 75 this past 3 weeks, and she is off of chemo. She has normal blood counts. She looks and feels amazing. And praise God, because now she's got to take care of Dad. But having said that, she is in the most vibrant health she's been in 40 years. I can't tell you what an awakening it's done to my 71, now 75-year-old mother. And if you want to read more about that, you can't leave the book without being inspired. It is the lessons I wrote for my mom that, thanks to my husband, who kept telling me to push publish despite my fear of not being a good writer, he definitely gets credit. As the helicopter goes over, I'm going to go to one more slide and just point out that the insulin levels on this slide, as the Dr. Boz ratio goes down, it is the insulin we're trying to predict. And that is how you can predict heart disease, is high insulin predicts the highest heart disease. My diabetics, when I put them on insulin, I know I am assigning them a younger death. It is dangerous to have high sugars. It's still dangerous to have high insulin. So as you look at how to do that, the ketones and glucose numbers can be best done. I like the FORACARE, and you can see that in the notes below. It is a meter that you have 1 meter, but you have 2 different sticks that you put into the meter. I find it's incredibly accurate when I compare it to my blood tests, but I also know that the strips aren't as fickle. They can get a little hotter or colder, and I'm from South Dakota where there's 110-degree heat. It's nicer in Hawaii than it is in my hometown of South Dakota this week. So when the strips get cold in the wintertime or hot in the summertime, patients would be really upset because they would have to pay for a whole new set. But I've really found that FORACARE has a much more stable strip, and the strips can get expensive. So if you put in Dr. Boz when you're checking out, you can get a little discount. Apparently, I've been quite a promoter for their meter, but I like that meter. There are other ones out there that work just well, but that's the one my patients have liked and I liked. Just to review, if you get that Dr. Boz ratio under 80, you might get into autophagy. I know you'll get weight loss. If you're in a weight loss stall and saying, what do I do now? What do I do now? I can't seem to get this under 80. Or I can't seem to get my weight loss, push that Dr. Boz ratio to under 80. If they're under 40, that's what I reach for every week, which is a solid chance of autophagy. And it does repair immune systems. It also is if I'm looking to help a diabetic with neuropathy, I really like it when they get their Dr. Boz ratio under 40. We know that we're repairing that nerve faster with the intense nutrition that goes with a ketogenic diet and a Dr. Boz ratio of under 40. Finally, the hardest to reach are those who are either my seizure patients on a prescription ketogenic diet and those who are doing this for cancer augmentation like I did with my mom. Keep in mind, this did not take the place of her regular chemo or her regular care. It just made it so much easier for her body to fight the cancer that she is now off of medications at 75 from something she was, and I have told her, she's never going to get off of. So I just can't say enough good things about how when you follow that process and protocol, you really do have an improvement in your immune system. So there's a couple things I want to make sure. I don't know if I said them out loud I said them out loud on the first time, but I don't know if I said them as much on the second time when the sound was off. And that is, when you're looking at predicting the nourishment that comes with a ketogenic diet, keeping those carbs less than 20 while increasing the fat, boy, really important those first 2 months of being on a ketogenic diet. As you return to the ketogenic diet, or as you return to a more stable chemistry, those first few months, your body's making a ton of changes. And we know that those changes are good for your system, but then they kind of level out. So some people say, hey, I've fallen into a weight loss stall, or much like Patty's situation, her cholesterol is what made her right into this. And I'm saying, yes, cholesterol is something you're going to hear us talk about. It's not nearly as important as insulin. And if you want to predict your risk of heart disease, I'm going to get to that next for the number one thing that I would ask Patty to do. She's already checking her blood glucose by telling me her morning fasting glucose is actually, that might have been from her lab. So I would encourage her to get the courage to poke your finger. Do it in the mornings is the most valuable data. So putting that information into a spreadsheet or keeping notes on it. I've had lots of folks write into me and say, can you take a look at this? And I kind of share a Google spreadsheet that I got from another patient to say, look, if you fill in these things, I can process and help you say, here's what I would do. Again, I use your information to help teach other people. Please do not let this substitute for your own relationships with your physicians. As I work towards meeting the demands of so many people writing in and educating them, I'm trying to find a process that would satisfy people at a cost-effective rate, and I'm not there yet, but YouTube is free. Please buy my book so I can keep doing this in order to help more people. So when I look at the last thing that I want to tell Patty, so first thing I'd tell her is you're losing weight. There are other things that that predict whether or not you're going to have a heart attack. Cholesterol is not the only thing. In fact, I would contend it's not the most important thing. Your insulin is the most important thing. Don't run off and get an insulin blood test. They are expensive and volatile, and you really do need to have a coach to tell you exactly what to do when they're measuring an insulin level. So if you don't have that coach, just get a FORACARE monitor and monitor your numbers. Those numbers really do help me help you, or you help you. You can watch these videos and see what I do with my numbers. Follow me on Instagram. It really is an audience I'm trying to grow. That's kind of been something I didn't know was so important when I first started, but I can't get a couple of the key things for teaching until I get 10,000 followers on Instagram, and I'm somewhere like at 8,000 or 9,000, so please be my friend, or whatever that's called on Instagram. Even if you don't have an Instagram account, just set it up, and that way, if I get a few more followers, I can turn on a couple of tools that really do allow the teaching to reach out to other folks. Just like Patty, I would want to say, hey, put your numbers into Instagram. If you put in, hashtag Dr. Boz Ratio, I look at that and I follow those. Now, I might not have been so good the last 3 weeks because I didn't have internet while I was in China, but I look for people who put in the Dr. Boz ratio to say, good job, here's what I would do, here's the video that I talk about this on, so you can use this as a teachable moment. So let's get to the last thing that I would recommend, and I don't have good slides on this. It is something I'm writing in my next book to be. It's just the data comes out almost as fast as I write it. I got one chapter done, and then another study came out that said it would be not honorable to put out a book without this new data in it. So, and it has to do with calcium CAC scores, or CAC scores, coronary artery calcium scores. So I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes of a history on coronary artery calcium scores. And I'm going to use my dad as a teachable moment. So my dad's an old man. He's an old man from South Dakota who had meat and potatoes his whole life, was not significantly overweight, but he wasn't nearly as lean as he should have been. And he had high blood pressure. The high blood pressure was a manly thing that he thought he could just not take his medicines for, until he got to the point where I scolded him enough saying, just take them. Unfortunately, he lost a lot of kidney function from not taking those medicines, and we were in the hospital over a year ago when we were again coming to some serious conversations about his heart disease and his kidney disease. And on an x-ray, you could actually see the calcification of his coronary arteries, of the arteries that supply blood to the muscle of the heart. The coronary arteries, they were calcified on the x-ray. That's a lot of calcium. Now, you don't need to wait for that kind of calcium to know if you've got a coronary artery calcium score that's elevated. There is actually a CAT scan out there that's very limited radiation, like less than a mammogram, and mammograms are actually really tiny these days for the amount of radiation. The coronary artery calcium scan is a quick flash of imaging that looks at the calcium that's already in the arteries of your heart. So what that does for me and for our science-based predictions is we can say right now, what is your risk of a heart attack? And if Patty wanted to measure what her risk of a heart attack is today, she could go get a coronary artery calcium scan. In most of your communities, you do not need a doctor's prescription. It is almost like and I'll say this in the nicest way, it's almost like a sales funnel that the coronary screening teams, they are looking for people with really high coronary artery calcium scores. And be careful if you get a really high one, just take in a friend with you if you go to get one of these done. But type Google in local coronary artery calcium score, and I will bet you that your cardiologists in your area are paying for advertisement, SEO advertisement online, to say anybody looking for one of these, pick us. Because if you have a heart problem and you end up in their system, they can help you. And I don't want you to be afraid of their help. But what I encourage you to be mindful of is if you step into a coronary artery calcium screening, there's more going on than there's a reason it only costs you $50. And don't be skeptical, just be mindful. So if Patty said, hey, I'm going to check out my coronary artery calcium score, and if she was lucky enough to be able to get a 0 on her coronary artery calcium score, that would mean that they did this CAT scan, they took a high resolution image of her arteries in her heart, feeding her heart, and bam, there was nothing in her arteries for calcification. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. So that gives her a really high risk, or really high chance that she is not going to have a heart attack for 10 years. So even though her cholesterol went up in the last 2 months while she's been on keto, I would say stay the course, girl. It's going to settle down. Right now you are replenishing your system. It's been low on fat nourishment, and the pipeline to feed your body's nourishment through high-fat nutrients, which is why the ketogenic diet improves our brain function, decreases seizures, decreases inflammation, improves your immune system, and oh, by the way, lowers your insulin so it allows us to lose weight. That the reason it does that is from the highly dense, nourished food that is in high fat. If you hadn't been on that before, which most of us hadn't, the first few months, you're going to see a surge in that total cholesterol, because cholesterol is the little boat that goes around delivering this high-fat nutrients. And I would say you have low HDL cholesterol and you have low you have high HDL cholesterol and you have low triglycerides, two of the most other important predictors of whether or not your body's inflamed. But if you added for $50, which is what it costs most people cash, walk in, you don't even need to give them your insurance card, just pay cash and say then you don't have access to all my other stuff, I guess, and just get the $50 worth of check your coronary artery calcium score. Here's where it gets goofy, is if it gets to be above 100, people are going to get a little nervous. If it's above 200, they get a little more nervous. I had a patient come in, and we're going to talk about him on the channel in the next couple of weeks, whose was 3,600. Yes, 3,600. Yeah, that was really high. But I would guess that my dad, who's got coronary artery calcifications on his x-ray, and oh, by the way, whose kidneys failed because his daughter didn't know this when I should have. But here's to forgiving yourself and everybody else. Maybe if I help more people through this channel, I can ask for forgiveness for not catching it in my dad, who has calcified coronary arteries. He has calcified kidneys. He has calcified renal arteries, which are the arteries that feed blood to the kidneys. And I don't say that out of pity. I say that out of, look what happens when physicians who have a really good intention, as I do, as most of my colleagues do, when I don't have the right information, when I've been fed that I should put my dad on a statin because his cholesterol is high. It wasn't terribly high, but it was a little high. And I did it over the age of 70, which really isn't going to save one patient life in 10 years. And I did that, and what it did was enhance his calcium production into his coronary arteries instead of remove it. One thing my dad was low on was vitamin D and vitamin K2. These are two fat-based molecules that if I look at anybody who has missed the boat, they are late into their diseases of health, and you say, what are some of the things that I universally recommend to patients? I mean, not only getting on the ketogenic diet while checking your Dr. Boz ratio, super important for my folks that are up there in years to check themselves. Not only is that for you, but it's for your doctor. Second thing I tell them to do is get on K2 and vitamin D. These fat-soluble vitamins, super under-delivered in my American patients anyway. And we're going to go into that into a different video. So I've been watching lots of your comments in the last little bit, just to give you some feedback. Patty, thank you for writing into your question. I hope this answered some of your questions. I hope that you were watching. I didn't see your name as I was clicking along, but maybe in the replays we will see it. Patty wrote in because she was worried about her cholesterol, but everything else in her life and body had been doing super well. And I would say that without a doubt, Patty's overall health has improved in the 3 months she's been on a ketogenic diet, but she's at that tipping point where 2 months in, they feel pretty good and they get a negative signal, whether that's from their doctor, sometimes doesn't understand a ketogenic diet, or they're not checking blood sugars and then they check it for the first time and it's higher than they expected. And maybe it's lower than it would have been, but nobody's been looking. So this is where I say, Patty, get yourself a monitor and check your Dr. Boz ratio. If you have the funds and resources to get a coronary artery calcium score, I would totally recommend it. It's something that you can measure over time to see if calcium is growing. But if you're lucky enough to have a 0 on your coronary artery calcium score, you've got a 10 years where you can be pretty confident. I would probably still check it in 3 to 5 years just to see how you're doing and go from there. So let me click over here, and I see a couple people. I'm going to go through some of the comments because there's one little panel here where I can use to read them, and it's a little bigger for me. Somebody says, get a Patreon account for financial support. So I actually have set that up, but I hadn't turned it on yet. I was kind of waiting for a major decision from the Medical Board of South Dakota, which came last month. I'll tell you, the reason I needed a vacation was there were so many things that happened in my last 4 months of life. I buried my mother-in-law. We've graduated my son from high school, and I had a decision from the medical board that has been just looming over my life for 7 years now that finally came to a decision about 4 weeks ago. And I just didn't want to do anything that would upset them or be controversial. I'm actually looking for applications for medical licensure outside the state of South Dakota just because I don't want to do that again. So I do appreciate the encouragement to go forward with the Patreon account. I haven't ever thought about that. I really like it when you just buy a few books, and what it does for me is I just know that we're educating people. This is super easy to understand if you look at the power behind the ketogenic diet. And I think if I could have had somebody teach me about this 15 years ago, my dad wouldn't be on dialysis today. So my new book is going to be a workbook and very, very heavy on the science. So the storytelling for my mother is nice in that. I do have actually Dr. Boz K2 vitamin D coming out. This was I put my name and resources behind supplements that I would prescribe to my family, and my parents are both on K2 D3. It was not easy to find the one that I liked, so I finally just had them make one. Just took a while to get out. The other supplements that I have out there, people are asking, is I do have ketones in a can, which has a sugar substitute in it. It tastes like raspberries, and my children drink it. They use it for debate tournaments. They also used it to treat acne. If you Google the acne video, it might be my favorite one of my 15, 16-year-old son, who I bet his inflammation on his face would go down if he just had ketones circulating. I have several of my demented patients who really can't follow a ketogenic diet that we've put the supplement in, and we've put it in their nursing home schedules that they just drink on it all day. Amazing what kind of awakenings they've had, but they really did need to stick to it for 2 months before we really could pull the supplement away. And then some of them, their memory wasn't good enough to stay on a ketogenic diet. They would still get offered carbs and eat them because they just couldn't remember why they were supposed to say no to that. So the supplement has really worked for them. I don't like sugar substitute, and my husband is allergic to stevia, so I put the ketones in a capsule that's just ketones in a can. If you open up the capsule and you put that on your tongue, it tastes terrible. So don't do that. That's why every supplement has a sugar substitute in it. So my husband now can take ketones in a capsule. He and I got married 21 years ago, and he had several vices, but one of them was always drinking a Coke, which I've said yuck to for years. But now when he drinks a Coke, he says that's okay. I'll take some ketone capsules afterwards. He's totally pushing my buttons there. But what I'm telling you is if you fall off the wagon of the ketogenic diet, which I went to China. Now I did really good actually, but there was a few times where there was nothing. I could have fasted, but I was sleep deprived, and anyway. So what I did after I had carbs was I would take 3 to 4 of those capsules. I'd set a timer and have to take 3 or 4 of those capsules again in about 3 hours. So it would give me 6 hours of good ketones in my circulation, and man, the cravings for carbs would drop, and I was back on the straight and narrow the next day. I don't like taking capsules, so when somebody asked me the other day, which would I prefer? Would I prefer the ketones in a capsule or drinking them? I think I would prefer drinking them. Like, I think the sugar substitute, I put heavy cream and ice in with mine, and I like that it's a high fat, little high fat, heavy cream in there, as well as the substitute. It seems to taste pretty good for me. If you type in Dr. Boz on Amazon, you'll find the supplements. The K2D3 comes out in the next week, so you won't find that just yet. Let's see, other things. What do I recommend? Krill oil for people with high cholesterol? Yeah, I do actually. I think you can find that in a ketogenic diet too. Tom actually talked about that my dad have him take K2 MK7. That's what the supplement is that I have him on. Yep. Let's see if I've got any other ones. The one person Keto Life says, cola is why I developed insulin resistance and have a fatty liver. I swear, my husband does a really good job of fasting. But boy, his downside is definitely he loves his Coke. The exogenous ketones are something to help people at the beginning or help people that just can't stick on the diet or that fall off of it. So somebody asked, why do you use them? At first I didn't use them, and I recommended people not to be on them. I just said you should be able to get these from your own fat cells, but much like, you look at the journey, I take care of folks in medicine where they're just too sick to follow all the rules to get back to health. And we use medications to help them get to the certain level, and then we hopefully have them get off the medications. Not always do we accomplish that, but that's our goal. And I would recommend that the best beginning is the circulation of a ketone. And what that does, not only to the blood-brain barrier, you start to upregulate the ability to pull those ketones from the circulation and put them in the brain so that they don't go through a huge brain fog. Or I've had folks complain of depression when they first start on the ketogenic diet. And it's during the slump that the glucose goes down, but the ketones haven't quite risen. And that's happening at the blood-brain barrier. When you fix that, when you put ketones in the circulation and now your blood-brain barrier is ready, you can lower the glucose and your ketones continue to function and really give you a steady supply of energy, and their brain doesn't go slump. It's also why my memory patients have had such positive results from the supplements. So let's see. I have the happy hooker. My CAC was 2600. Would like to figure out how to lower it. So let me just say one more thing about calcium or coronary scores, is that once the calcium is in there, we have some studies coming out to say over time we think we can lower it, but that is really early in the data, and I wouldn't be overly stressed about lowering it. I would just be about maintaining it. Do not let it go higher. And really the best thing that you can do for that is you need to have a Dr. Boz ratio of under 100 every day. You'll see me chirping about getting it under 40 and getting it under 80 and getting it under 20, but you want low inflammation. You want it under 100 every day. And whether you have to take supplements to get it under 100 or you have to start intermittent fasting to get it under 100, you really want to keep that lower. Your body will decrease, and it's amazing how fast I've seen them feel better. And over time, they do get stabilization of those coronary artery scores. So that's nice to see. But you only check those every couple of years. I mean, you can at 6 months, but I would just be careful about checking them that closely. I mean, you're looking at deposition into the coronary artery calcium, so you've got to give it stable time. What you can check every day is those morning fasting sugars. And boy, we had our I Skyped in from Hawaii for our weekly keto meeting this week, and it's just amazing when you check in with a team of people all trying to improve your process of health. We don't charge for that. We do that for free in my community to say we want people being healthier, and you can do that by uniting as a community. So I think I am going to sign off. It's been almost an hour, and I appreciate those of you being patient when I started, and say thanks to Prescott, who is about to start his senior year, or excuse me, freshman year of college, and I still have to buy the ticket to fly home yet. I haven't done that yet. Yes, I'm totally struggling. And I also want to say thank you to New Hope Church. This morning, Prescott Googled and found us a church to go to. And, when you're making transitions, and like I've said, there's been a lot in our life in the last 2 months that has really come down, as I've been in the wrong time zone for almost 3 weeks now, between sleep deprivation and saying a big goodbye to my son as I leave him in Hawaii. It was so comforting to be welcomed by a church. And they're the ones who actually gave me this beautiful lei that smells amazing, and just said we'll pray for him and we'll check on him, even if he doesn't check on them, but to be a part of a community where we have lots of political things going on in our country today, and I will say that the most important messages come out of our homes and our local churches to say be active in your community. Take the gifts that God's given you and use them for one another. And that's why I do this channel. That's why I really encourage you to buy the book. It really does support this channel. And I hope that you've learned something. I do read your comments. Even if I've not gotten to the internet much in the last 3 weeks, it's a huge part of how I'm trying to plan the next chapter of my life. So thank you for the support. Thank you for being present, and say a big prayer for my dad and my son as they take on chapters of their life. Signing off as Dr. Boz. We are here improving your health one ketone at a time. Until next time, everybody.